So in this video I'm going to show you how I put this photo together. This photo started out in 2018 with this image. This image was taken at the Shuttleworth collection. Now I've just cropped this a little bit, so let me go back to how it started out. So this was taken at the Shuttleworth collection, and if we zoom in on this to one, you can see it's not particularly sharp. It's actually quite soft. But nevertheless, I like the photo, and it's quite hard to get a photograph of the top of the Lancaster. Normally you would see the underside of it, but thankfully at Shuttleworth they fly them in such a way that you can get this sort of image. So what I decided I wanted to do with this photo was to actually create something which looked like it could have been from the 1940s. And at that time the images were quite grainy and they were quite low in saturation. And it's also, as you can see, taken against a plain blue sky. And so what I really would like to do is to actually do something with this so it's a bit more interesting. So what I did in here was did a bit of auto toning, added my lens profile, which got rid of the vignetting in the corners, and then we just crop it. My original idea for this photo, and this is still my favourite, was to put it onto this background. This is still my favourite version of the Lancaster. The problem is this background isn't mine. And just for information, this isn't a background of clouds. What this is a photograph of film emulsion that had been taped down and had obviously faded. I actually like this photo. This is my, as I say, this is my favourite version. But because it's not my background, there's no way I could ever submit this into a competition. So then I started playing around with my own backgrounds. So this is my own texture that I put together. I'll show you how to put textures together in another video. But this is what I did. And you can see in here it's quite grainy. That's helpful because it helps mask the fact that the photo isn't sharp. And then the border is simply using a vignette where I've put all the sliders all the way down, and that creates this hard border. But I'm not happy with that. I wasn't happy with that. I still preferred my original version, which is this one. In 2017 I turned 60, and my sister gave me an Experience Day voucher for my birthday, and I used that on a hot air balloon trip. And this is one of the photos that I took off this trip. They were actually flying two balloons that day, and this is the other balloon in the distance. This is the unprocessed photo, and all I'm going to do is remove the balloon, and then we'll just do some basic toning, which gives me this image. And what I would like to do is to put the Lancaster on this photo. So what I'm going to do is select both of those images, and then we'll choose Edit in, Open as Layers in Photoshop. This will load both of those images in as separate layers into the same document. So going to do layering, and you know the images you want to use, this is a good way to do it. And I would like to get my Lancaster on the top layer. So let's just resize this to make this fit. Now obviously it's a bit big for the image, and it's actually climbing, and I'd like to level this out. So what I'm going to do is go to Edit, and then choose Free Transform. And with Free Transform I can bring the image down. To actually position it right, it would be a good idea just to reduce the opacity down to around 50% or so. And then you can see where you're going to position the image. And then I'll move the mouse outside so I get the double headed cursor, and I can just rotate the image just to straighten it out, and then we'll put it in the desired position. Accept that, and then we'll put the opacity back up again. So what I obviously need to do now is to remove the blue. So we hide the image underneath and then go to select and color range. And then in color range we can then choose the colors. As you can see, as I click around in the blue there, it's choosing different parts of the image. I can then either click on the plus to actually select other areas, or I can then instead just use the fuzziness, which will help smooth it out. Something like that. Now I've got two ways to do this, because what this is actually doing, this is selecting the sky, this is selecting the blue, and I don't want to select the blue, I want to select the aircraft. So I can either invert it here, or I can invert it in the layer underneath. We'll invert it here and click on that, and if we then enable the layer underneath, all I need to do here is click on the mask button, add mask, and that gets rid of the sky. Now if I look carefully in here, if we zoom in, hopefully you might be able to see it on the video. And I've lost it myself now. There we go. You might be able to just about see there's a line going around here. And that's the edge of the Lancaster. And so what I would like to do is to remove this. So to remove that, make sure I have my mask selected. And then I select my brush, and with a background colour of being black, and I want to make sure my hardness is down to 0. And we'll just resize this because I don't need it this big. And all I'm going to do is just paint around the edge of this. Make sure my opacity is up to 100% on this. And if you really want to see what you're doing, we can hold down the Alt key and click on the mask. Let's just zoom out, and then we can see that I'm just going to paint over the edge where we've got this clearly defined sharp edge here. Let's put my flow up to 100% as well. It doesn't matter if you go over the edge, because you're not going to see it anyway. And then click back on the layer, and there we go. One Lancaster put into the sky. And notice by doing the colour range, I wasn't being too fussy about what happened around the blur on the propellers. And that's for two reasons. One is because the background that I've chosen is going to help hide the sky from the original image coming through where the propeller is blurred. And two, I'm going to put a grain on the image anyway, which will further help hide that. But at this stage, I then took it back into Lightroom. So back in Lightroom, we have this photo, and this is how it came back. So we're going to put a vignette on it. Again, I tend not to put terribly heavy vignettes on here. If we just zoom in on the image, we can maybe see in here that we've still got some hints of blue from the original photo of the Lancaster, but we'll put some grain on it. That helps disguise it. Grain comes out of the effects panel, and we'll just adjust the amount on the grain. Then I'm going to do something with the contrast, or desaturate it. So I adjust the contrast because I'm going to desaturate. I want to desaturate quite a lot, but I still want to have some definition there. It's a little bit on the dark side, so we'll just open up the shadows. Again, we'll just amend the grain, amend the contrast, and then we'll crop it. Now what I would like to do is to darken the sky to get a bit more definition there. So to do this, I'm going to add a graduated filter, which in Lightroom is this tool up here. And if you hold down the Shift key, the graduated filter will remain parallel to the edge from which you drag it. This is dragged from the top, and if I do it from the left, it remains parallel to the left if I hold down the shift key. So I've added a graduated filter. I'm going to then adjust the exposure, so I've made it darker, but notice what it's done, it's darkened the aircraft as well, which I don't want. So to do this, what we do is we click on the brush tool up here, the brush word up here, not the adjustment brush, but the word, and then click on erase, and I can then start erasing out of the aircraft. And after a fair amount of brushing to get rid of it off the aircraft, we end up with something that looks like that. So we can see now that I've darkened the sky, but I haven't darkened the aircraft. Adjust my exposure on that sky to get it how I wanted, and then it's just a question of cropping. I don't like this building down here in the bottom right hand corner, so we'll just crop it to get rid of it. And that's it. One Lancaster put onto a photograph of the Peak District.